little introduction last time. We're going to be covering off ramp grades, lines, signs, roundabouts, and positioning of raised crossings around roundabouts, sight lines, sight distances, lighting, and drainage. And the first thing I do want to remind you here, though, is each jurisdiction usually has little nuances, little design notes, or uses particular guides or standards, and sometimes they slightly differ. So I'm going to talk at a principles level in design, and I will dip into different standards and guidelines just for demonstration purposes. However, I really want you to take away some principles that we can use. So let's start with general design objectives. And I think we have covered this actually quite nicely through Hafez, Prue, and Bridget's conversations, presentations. But a few key ones there: on pedestrian desire lines or cyclist desire lines to ensure the facility best serves the users. Convenient and traversable by all path users. I think Bridget comprehensively gave us information about that. High alignment with safe system principles. And I'm going to get into a bit more of it, but Hafez nicely painted that picture, and then Prue built on that with speeds and biomechanical tolerances. And then we want to think at that sort of network level, ensure that we're thinking about corridors and the continuation of travel. So I think those are covered off quite nicely already. If we drill down into a bit of, okay, what are our design principles? The design principles I put in there, and I'm happy for others to add any others they think that should be in there, is first of all thinking about what is the severity of incident should it occur? So how do we manage vehicle speeds at the conflict point? Then I'm thinking about likelihood. And we sort of do this hand in hand, but likelihood. So we're thinking about sight distance, and then signage. And I've gone with the 7 C's of signage, which some of you might know: conspicuous, clear, concise, comprehensible, credible, consistent, and compliant. We want to think about drainage, lighting, and then I've got speed again, but this is speed on the approach to the crossing and the conflict point for decision-making. So those are sort of some principles I want you to take away at a very high level. And I'm really going to spend the next 2 hours delving into these and giving you a good understanding of them. So let's start with sight distance. Actually, something I shuffled some order around in this because of some of the commentary that had happened in earlier sessions. And I thought I'd start off with one particular thing in here. And I've got our Wombat friend here, and our Wombat friend is unsure whether it's thumbs up or thumbs down for this crossing. So hopefully you can see that there. But as we did before, I just want you to type in the chat, thumbs up or thumbs down, or happy with this or not happy, or good, bad. What we're seeing there is the approach to a pedestrian crossing. And for our international visitors, I remind you that this is pedestrian priority here, with the legs and the zebra markings, or the markings there. So we've got 2 lanes approaching in the one direction and 2 lanes in the other direction, separated by a median. And I'm seeing, what are we seeing there, Bridget? A few thumbs down, it looks like.
Yeah, mostly downs. And a couple of people have offered reasons why that might be. 2 lanes is the most commonly given reason.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, I think that's good analysis. So let's just diagrammatically show what people are saying there. So some people are explaining that if we have vehicles, we have multiple lanes on the approach to a pedestrian crossing facility where pedestrians have priority, what we see there is the vision of that trailing driver is blocked by a vehicle in front of it. And what we often see there is it could be a truck or a larger vehicle, and a pedestrian crossing here, And we see that issue with not enough sight distance. We also see this quite often with a vehicle that is coming up behind, and the braking occurs of a truck or a larger vehicle, and the other vehicle comes around to overtake and make a fast move around that. So that's the reasoning why there's a lot of concern around multi-lane crossings. And this is a big hot topic for anybody associated with Australian standards at the moment. They're umming and ahhing and debating. But let's have a look at this one, okay? I want you now to give me another thumbs up and thumbs down. Again, we've got 2 lanes approaching a pedestrian crossing here. You can see there, it is just a pedestrian crossing. Don't worry about this bike rider. They're just sort of watching what's happening. It's actually a friend of mine. We rode out there together. So you've got, 2 lanes, and this one's approaching a roundabout, but the same idea. So are we going thumbs up, thumbs down on this one, or?
Yeah, more positive generally, people are.
Generally more positive.
Mostly thumbs up. Yep.
Okay.
With some caveats, perhaps.
Good. And I'd agree with that. I mean, I am so much happier with this setup. Okay. And the reasons I'm happier with it, well, one is raised. Okay. So any incident that's going to happen is going to be lower speed and much more, survivable, and it significantly lessens the chance of any of these, fast overtaking maneuvers or the like. So that's a win. And then the second one, obviously, is this buffered area here that will open up our sight lines. So if I jump to the side here, and it's the same crossing, I've just moved myself to a sort of position where I can safely take a photo pretending to be a driver. And you can see there that the truck is pulling up sort of here, and you've got quite nice sight lines back into this envelope as a pedestrian would be coming through here. If hypothetically that buffered area did not exist and we move the truck into a line where it's much closer to that running lane, we can see significant portions of that sight line triangle has been eliminated, and there's more of a chance of a pedestrian sort of popping out there. So you could think if you were a driver traveling along there. So, I mean, the moral of this one, or the principle of this one, is that even on 2-lane crossings, we can provide a pretty safe and thumbs up outcome. It does take some tweaks, raising the crossing, opening up some sight lines, but it certainly is a possibility. Now, this is quite an unconstrained site, so you've got some, ability to do this, but an overarching theme I'm going to put to everybody today is that designers and engineers are people that overcome issues, right? We look at these challenges and we say, well, what can we redesign? How can we reconfigure to meet these principles that we want? Often people just automatically default to, we can't do it because it doesn't meet a guideline or a standard. And I'm really going to ask you to challenge that and say, no, I'm an engineer, or I'm a designer, or I'm a technician here, and my job is to work out how we can achieve those principles. So you can see there, I've sort of schematically drawn up the buffered area. It could be a splitter island or whatever it is. And you can see that difference in sightline where we get a nice sort of distance there, or distance to a conflict point, and a really quite a nice sight triangle for the approaching driver there. Okay, good. So thank you. Now, let's talk about sight lines in general to raised crossings. And I'm going to put in there a few common variables, but you can't just take these blindly, okay? You've got to think about them. I'm going to give sort of 1.2 meters a second walking speed, okay? There's a lot of standards and guidelines around the world that generally pop something in like that. I'm going to take 1.6 meter setback as a point of importance or a distance of importance to be able to see a pedestrian approaching. And in terms of an eye height, which we might use later, I'm going to take the eye height here that a lot of standards and guidelines around the world use of a wheelchair person. It's also quite a nice one for children as well. At that 1.07, they got very precise. Somebody got very precise on this. You could have probably just gone 1 meter, but anyway, nonetheless. But these we'll use a little bit. Some interesting stuff to come around. Well, why are we thinking about eye height and a few other things? So now I want to go to some road rules, and I've picked Australia and New Zealand here. And in the road rules, we do see some mention of no parking distances. Okay, so under the Australian road rules, which are what the states and territories set their own rules based off. Sometimes they vary a bit, but this is pretty much, I think it's the same in every jurisdiction. It talks about a 20-meter no parking or no stopping area on the approach to a crossing, right? So you can't have a vehicle in that zone. New Zealand talks about a 6-meter one. Now, the important thing here is that I see a lot of local governments simply using this as their sightline triangle. They don't work out a sightline triangle. They don't think about it. They just go 20 meters back and we're good. Now, that poses a lot of issues in two directions, actually. One being there will be situations where that is excessive. You do not need that much sight distance. Okay, and it will limit the places people will put in pedestrian crossing. The second one is, in some situations, that won't be enough. And we won't have time to see a pedestrian that is crossing. So I absolutely insist that people know this part of it that I underlined. Okay, you can sign it differently. You can sign it differently. And then it's all within the road rules. So let's talk about how we actually work out what is more appropriate. Hey, maybe 20 might be appropriate, but let's work that out. Okay, I've got some diagrams here. We've got a pedestrian, they're crossing, 1.6 meter setback. This is not a raised crossing. This is just an at-grade pedestrian priority, like a zebra crossing. We need that driver to be able to see that pedestrian and react and brake and come to a stop before that conflict point. Okay. And so what we do is we use a fairly standard stopping sight distance calculation. You could say safe intersection sight distance. It's exactly the same formula, SISD, SSD, and we've got this formula and we simply can work it out. And so what you're going to need to know is, well, what is the speed of those vehicles approaching? So what is the 85th percentile speed, or what is the speed limit if this is a completely greenfield site? And in urban areas, I don't tend to add that 10% design speed to speed limit because you're generally much closer. If it's a completely rural environment, high speed, and you're doing other design stuff, then yeah, maybe you've got to add that 10%. But anyway, so you've got some sort of approach speed. Okay. Then we need to go to working out, well, what's an appropriate reaction time? So that driver's got to see the pedestrian, process that information in their head, lift their foot up, right? And then start braking. So that's our reaction time. Okay. Then we think about, well, how much friction have we got on the road? Is it going to be wet? And what's our coefficient of deceleration? So we've got then reaction time, and I will take quite a low reaction time in pedestrian crossing scenarios. Why is that? Because it's an urban area, there's lots going on usually, and these are quite excessive reaction times in most standards and guidelines. I mean, they've got a lot in there for people who are really not with it. But most urban area driving has a bit more interaction. Bridget talked to you about, a lot of bit of daydreaming and things, but they'll be seeing a crossing and right. So then the coefficient of deceleration, I do though use a more conservative one of these for a wet weather condition. So a 0.36 is a pretty good coefficient of deceleration. I think that this one we've got it like dry roads and a lot of other. I would prefer a wet road as your baseline scenario on that. Okay, so now we've got some variables there, and we can plug this into our formula. And we simply go reaction time 1.5, and then we go the road speed divided by 3.6 to get the meters per second, and we get 50. Don't worry about the calculations too much. We come out with something like 48 meters. Okay, so that is, that's a pretty decent distance. Now, yes, we're going to have some parking that could come up here if you've got parking, or you might have trees. But let's take that. So that's what we would want if it's not a raised crossing for somebody to have time to react to a pedestrian coming up. Now, of course, if this is like a running path or something like that, or we know there's a super, straight run into that, 1.6 may not be appropriate for the setback, and we might have to go further to say, well, we need a bit more room. So you've got to be context sensitive on this. So the 48 meters there is from driver to conflict point. Now, we just raised it. And the thing I'm seeing a lot now is designers say, well, I just use the pedestrian crossing sight lines because what else? I don't really know what else I could use. There's nothing documented really to do this. And I want to ensure safety. Like safety is my, I want to give lots of safety factors in that. The thing for me with that is that it is going to limit the amount of raised crossings that we can get in. And we need to deploy these all over the place. And if you're being really super generous with sight distances everywhere and demanding that, you just won't get it in because you'll be moving heaps of car parking, you'll have trees in the way, you'll have all these things, and people will just say, no, well, we can't have the crossing there. So, but this is not logical, is it? Because we know this vehicle is going to slow down. It has to. It's got to navigate over a raised crossing. So let's think about that again and say, well, actually, that vehicle is going to slow down by itself. And so what is this point where they've slowed down and then they see the pedestrian and then they have enough time to stop? And so you could say, well, actually, we want to know what is the ramp grade speed. So what is a comfortable speed for that driver to navigate over this raised platform? And then let's use that in our calculation. So say ramp grades maybe 20, and we give a little extra because some people might go a little bit faster over it. So we'll take 25 and we plug that through. And look, we're down at 17 meters for that distance. So a significant reduction there. So that's really interesting and gives you facility to be able to put more of these in constrained scenarios. So I just want to elaborate on this a bit. And I was spending a lot of time with a colleague and we were nutting at how do I explain this best? And I want to give this little scenario and then I'll check in if there's any questions. But you've got a vehicle, ticking along here at free flow speed. Okay. Then at some point, right, they've got to be able to see that something's coming up. And that's what we call approach sight distance. I'll take you through this shortly. Approach sight. You've got to be able to see the crossing. You don't need to necessarily see that somebody is crossing. You've got to know there's a crossing there, right? Then you process information. Then you start braking and slowing down because you're going to have to navigate over something. And then there's a decision point. So let me sort of graph this for you. Okay, this is my little thing to try to explain it. We've got speed here of vehicle, ticking along at say 50, free flow operating speed, right? Then, okay, oh, I've seen there's a raised crossing coming up, reaction, Now I'm going to start slowing down. And there is the real decision point. Okay, they're going to split. They're either going to go, aha, there's a pedestrian crossing, I shall stop, and I've got time to stop, or we're good to go, and they will keep going at that 25 ramp grade, and then they'll kick back up after. So I hope that sort of explains the principles of what we're looking for and why being overly conservative on this could have larger implications for us.
Well, I think that was a beautiful graph, Ken. It made perfect sense to me. It reminds me of hydrology when you're talking about rainfall and catchments and when things might go one way or another. But there's no questions at the moment. But I think if people are digesting that and they've got questions, feel free to chuck them in the chat.
Yeah, great. I will ask some questions of the group again shortly, but I'm glad people are sort of pondering that one. So really, you know, we can lessen that sight distance if we raise it. And that's another major advantage of us raising crossings. So yes, we're going to get lower impact speeds, but we're bringing our sight distance requirements down significantly as well, which means, and like parking is a huge issue for local government. And we can, you know, debate all of that as we want and the like. But the practical reality is across Australia and New Zealand, at least that I'm aware of, parking is stopping a lot of, you know, these things going in. So if we can do that, we're in a better place. So we use a deceleration rate of 2.5 meters a second squared. And I won't get into that. But what I will ask is, okay, I've given you a way to think about a lessened sight distance requirement by raising, okay? I'll ask the group, what else do you think we could do to lessen the sight distance requirements? Like what would help us get better sight distance?
So we'll let people type some in. Anthony's jumped in straight away with build outs. So curb build outs, essentially making that 1.6 meters shorter.
Okay.
Shashi's also said reduce the speed, so the starting speed. Yeah, and someone else reduce the speed of the corridor by reducing the width, perhaps, of the carriageway.
Yep, these are fantastic, and in fact, those are your big ones, aren't they? You can really vary the approach speed, or you can move where that pedestrian is. So let's have a look at that there. So for those who aren't quite understanding what we mean by build outs there, or curb out stands, as they're called in some areas, and prize for Anthony, by the way, for saying that one first, and then prize for whoever said reduce the speed of the vehicle on the approach. You with that build out, you open up that sight line more. Pretty obvious stuff, but when you're thinking about it with these specific calculations on sight lines, it can really help you. So we have some really exciting, you know, ways to re-energize our thinking about sight lines and not see them as a constraint, see them as an opportunity for us to go back to some first principles and work a few of these things out and ensure we do have time for a vehicle to see, to react, and to stop if appropriate, but not stopping us getting those in the first place. Okay. This is a little other thing that I think reinforces why we want pedestrian sort of priority and raised crossing. So crossing sight distance is another one. And the theory of crossing sight distance is that pedestrian there, they don't have priority across this road, okay? So they've got to wait for cars and they've got to look for a gap, okay? And they need a certain amount of distance to be able to see, to look for that gap and to make an appropriate speed, and then to dart across the road, okay? And what we do there is that's where we use that 1.6 or the speed of a walker, okay? So you've got that distance and they need to be able to cross, pick a gap and cross. So if we look at crossing sight distance calculations, on this one and say, I don't know, we've got a 40 kilometer per hour speed of this vehicle. We plug it into the formula and we've got a 65 meters. So they need quite a distance to be able to see that vehicle, see if there's a gap, start shuffling across the road, make it all the way. So we've got in here the distance, the distance that they actually have to cross is a variable in there. So, how far. Okay. So it's a long way to go. But okay, let's look then at safe, like a safe stopping sight distance. So stopping sight distance at a few different speeds here. Okay. And you'll see there that we've got, well, if we took that other one, if we're taking the ramp grade, we're at 17. If we take the, even the free flow speed, we're less. So we've got more time as a driver to be able to do this. But if you can't meet either of these, all right, what we can think about is that approach sight distance, which I talked about before. So can the vehicle see the fact that they may have to give way? Okay, and they need to do that from eye height down to the ground level. There's an approach sight distance calculation, which actually happens to be the same as the other one. And so what we're saying here is that this vehicle may be able to see that sight line. Hey, there's something there I may have to give way. And all of a sudden, we've met a sight distance requirement, which they will start to react to and go through their process. And you measure that actually along the curved line. Now, the really important thing here is that we absolutely do not meet crossing sight distance. That pedestrian has no ability to make a proper informed judgment as to whether they have time to cross. But the driver has, under all of our calculations, all the appropriate ability to see, to react, to slow down. And then we might have a small stopping sight distance calculation based on the ramp speed. So again, what we're seeing here is that if you think about things this way, we have an imperative in situations where we can't provide crossing sight distance to give priority to the pedestrians and raise the crossing. And this comes to light quite a bit on raised crossings, and Prue will be able to talk a lot more about this, but often you find these scenarios where you have buildings and you have other reasons why that particular sight line is blocked. And people again will go, oh, we can't put pedestrian priority crossings in there. Well, actually, the reality is you almost must, because the pedestrian won't be able to see there. But that sight line is open. So that driver is going to know that they're going to have to slow down and check. So I think we've got a really nice justification using the standards and guidelines to sort of demand some of these raised crossings in these scenarios. The reality is that a lot of these, you also slow the vehicles down significantly because you put raised crossings on all legs. So you've got much, lower speeds that you can use, and then you can open up sight lines and utilize those. And you actually can almost, in a lot of cases, get both those sight lines. But anyway, that's where we were at. Okay. So I'm throwing a lot of sightline information and the like through, but let's have a little chat about this one with a thumbs up, thumbs down of our crossing here. Now we nicely got the crossing near the bus stop, and we knew that that was an important thing to do, wasn't it? Because people get off the bus and they're going to need to cross, and we want to provide them nice crossing. But
we got lots of sad faces and thumbs down.
Okay. So this might be, considered a dynamic visual obstruction. So meaning that it's not there all the time. And do we consider it a sight distance impediment or not? And I think everybody's on the same lines that we do need to think about this as a sight distance impediment. Occasionally you get standards and guidelines around the world that ignore the fact that vehicles will be a sight distance impediment. They talk about only permanent fixtures, but that certainly is going to block that. And again, we see it's not a raised crossing. So we're going to have higher free flow speeds going through there and blocked sight lines. So that's certainly a, something that we want to think about. So what are our options there? And I'm sure.
So people are talking about moving the bus stop or moving the crossing relative to the bus stop.
Yes.
Curb build outs.
Yes.
Yeah, a couple of people saying the same kinds of things, and raising the crossing.
That's it. They're the ones I want to hear. I think we ticked all the 3 boxes that I wanted.
Excellent.
So absolutely. So that bus stop, you think about that as a sightline impediment. Think about slowing the vehicles also, and build outs and other measures to try to do that. So let's jump to this one. So don't worry about the not in use signs for the flashing lights. They're just waiting to be switched on. Doing a bit of a post-opening audit here, or just before opening audit, I suppose, or mid-opening audit. What are we seeing here? We got a thumbs up or thumbs down? The little wombat looks confused.
We're getting some thumbs up. It's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I like it. I was quite excited by this one for a number of reasons. It had nice sight lines, and it's got, I'll show you a little later, it's got some cool little drainage features. A few little, minor issues, but overall, I'm really sort of quite impressed and excited by it. Went back to do the nighttime inspection and actually coincided it with some time of intense activity. There's a big netball sort of courts and a school there, and after school, and found that people were all deciding to park in that little bit, which was not for parking, because everything was clogged up and that was a free spot, and they just thought they'd prop in there and wait for their kid or whatever it was coming out. So, reinforces the importance of getting out there and looking at it in different scenarios and the like. But just be aware of that. You are leaving that sort of lovely gapped area here that possibly, if you can, some different features to discourage illegal parking in those situations if you think it's going to be a high activity place like that. And that comes up with school crossings as well. We can't say parents and the general punter does not know that we're looking to have sight lines clear. They just see it as unknown reason why people are not, why we're not parking there. And people park in these places all the time. So if you can do different features, wheel stops, or extending out your curb build out or the like, it can be a really nice way to ensure that we don't block that sight line with the dynamic visual obstruction. Okay, this is probably going to be a little bit hard for you because you're only seeing one picture from one direction and the like. We do have a area. We've got the curb build out in this one. We've got the there's some no stopping. You can't see that signs there and the like. It's raised. Thumbs up, thumbs down. This one's probably a little bit harder, and as I say, because you don't see the whole picture, and I just want to talk about a couple of things. Okay.
We got mostly ups and a so-so.
Yep. I'm generally pretty happy with it. I think it's done well. The raising is such an amazing aspect to it. Sight lines, good in general. We've got that ability. We can have the 1 meter setback, and we might like to have done a little bit more there. But generally, we're generally okay. What I want to talk about, though, is the potential for vegetation to grow. And I'm not saying this one is going to be high vegetation, but I'm using it as just a an example. Okay, landscape architects and the like. I mean, this is prime territory. I've got a little garden bed to work with, and you know, it can be really lovely spot for planting, and you can make beautiful things. But just be aware that that could grow to a sightline impediment. Now, we talked about a wheelchair person at eye height of 1.07. And that's often what people will take as the height that, you know, we can have vegetation or other things at in this particular spot. But that doesn't quite make sense to me, that we're just going to have just the top of somebody's like a head in a wheelchair, or just, you know, a kid just popping their eyes over the top. Is that enough for us? So I mean, the principle really should be low-lying vegetation. You can do some beautiful things with that. But thinking about if you are going to have any sort of vegetation, that it is, you know, up around the 300. Now, Prue's got a rule of thumb that she says she got from somebody else, but maximum 0.5 meter to one, and then 1.5 meter, ensuring that envelope is free to be able to see. But again, I just want you to take the principle that we need to consider that sight line at a height as well. So not just the horizontal sight line we were talking about with that one, but also thinking about that vertical one as well.
I think we might have to give a prize to Brendan, because he said when the vegetation's grown, you can't see a wombat crossing the wombat crossing. That's exactly right. Think about wombats to help think about that particular issue.
Very good. Very good. Another little one I just pop out there is a little design specific, and I really like this one from Warrnambool. I mean, I like their ones around roundabouts for a whole lot of reasons. Some of the community aren't so happy, but I think they're getting used to it and starting to walk around the town a bit more, which is wonderful. They've utilized sort of this last angled parking crossing for the disabled parking, and then use that sort of buffer area, which can be really useful. If they put this as a normal angled parking for cars, the vehicle backing out has to back out sort of over the pedestrian crossing, which is very low speed, but it can be a real disruption and can cause quite a bit of an issue with people crossing and the like. So I think it's a neat way to do it, but just think about that vehicle backing out on that angled parking over your crossing facilities. Now, I've been talking about pedestrians, haven't I? Pedestrians crossing. What on earth do we do when we give priority to a cyclist crossing the road? And this is, you know, really starting to be all the rage. And you know, Prue's been out there all across Queensland painting yellow crossings, and a lot of it happening around Victoria and a bit in New South Wales, and New Zealand starting to get moving on things. All right, and so essentially what we're doing is almost creating a bit of a road, aren't we? An intersection here. So if you start to think about this as an intersection, where the vehicles are the ones without priority, it starts to help you with thinking about some sight lines. But what speed do we use for a cyclist, and what eye height do we use? Well, the 1.4 seems to be cyclist height. But if you're in these situations where you've got shared paths, you're really going to be going back to your pedestrian eye heights and the like. But why wouldn't you use the pedestrian speed? Because the bike rider is obviously going to be coming in faster. So we're going to need some more time, aren't we? And some more distance for a driver to know, oh, hang on a second here. I'm going to have to stop because that cyclist all the way back there is moving pretty quick. So there's a number of different bits of information out there on what speed should we take for a cyclist. And I put in some of the research around that. That TMR comes out with that sort of 15 to 25 or 4.1 to 6.9 meters a second. And we could plug that in there. I'm actually a little bit more drawn to the Victorian guidance on this, which I'm going to talk through. And they talk about 20 kilometers per hour for shared paths and 30 kilometers per hour for bicycle cycleway facilities dedicated for cyclists, because they'll be going at higher speed. Okay, so there's some interesting ones. I mean, the 20 sits nicely between those two that TMR puts out there. Anyway, back to principles that we're going for. There's a speed of the cyclist coming in, which is going to be much higher than the speed of somebody walking. Now, if you have these facilities where we've got that sort of crossing separation, so it's not a shared path, we've got a cycle facility next to a pedestrian priority crossing, you're really going to be taking the cyclist speed to ensure we've got sight lines catered for there. Now, you're going to make some judgment calls on those speeds of the cyclists, because if you've got different measures to slow down the cyclist on the approach to the crossing point, then you can take lower speeds. Here we go. Hopefully you're seeing this, but here's the approach to a crossing point, and there was a white car that came in there. I'll play that again. I think I've got it on loop here, Bridget. So I'm hoping it's streaming through and people can see it. So you can see there, riding along about 20 kilometers an hour. And it's going to play again. Yep. And riding along, and I've got a sight triangle, and then, oh, there's a car. They've seen me. I've seen them. And, you know, have we got time? So to work out those sight triangles, I'm going to use the approach that's been taken in this document. And I should say all the documents that I am talking to, or the bulk of the documents I'm talking to, are in the resource folder in the
learning management system. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Bridget. Yes, so you'll be able to get this document. The ones I haven't put in there are ones that, you know, have copyright issues and you have to buy and those sorts of things. So let's go through the approach that you use for this one. So this approach is sort of founded on a principle of mutual sight distance. And that is really sort of saying, in conventional road design, you talk about it as decision time. It's put here as travel time, but we're thinking about enough time for a driver to react, but also the cyclist to react. Even though the cyclist has priority, but we want to ensure that they can see that car coming in and go, oh, this one ain't stopping. All right, and then take emergency evasive action. Now, they sort of think about this in a risk management perspective and put some tables down here. And you see that you sort of got to decide, well, what am I going to use as this travel time? Now, 5 seconds, we're talking about really high speed environments for the vehicle, you know, 70 or 80 kilometers an hour. Now, you might think, oh my God, who's putting a raised crossing on a 70 or 80 kilometer per hour road? No, this is a scenario where you've got a main road and you've got a bike path running parallel to it. And we're talking about the 80 kilometer per hour road here. Okay. And you do get quite a bit of that. And so so that's why we're thinking in those environments. But down here are the 2 second for these lower speed roads. So let me just put this into demonstration for you. I think you've got the idea, but here we see a car coming in and nobody could see.
Trigger warning.
Yeah, nobody could see, right? The driver's going along, they thought, okay, I'm going to go over this like a speed hump. Now, that's an interesting one, because in one sense you would say, well, hang on a second, that driver does not have right of way. They should be slowing down to a stop and looking, okay? Yeah, you have to be a little bit careful because wombat crossings or raised shared crossings like this often get used in a slightly different way to that. And they navigate them like a local area traffic management device, but then they're having a look. Almost think about it a bit more like a roundabout from that mutual sight distance calculation. So we don't want that to happen. Okay, so you want to ensure that we do have some sort of sight line here. And I'm going to designate these A and C as they do in the Victorian guidance. And so what we want to do is cover off two scenarios here. First one we want to cover is that the driver sees and goes, okay, off you go, cyclist, and nicely, as per everybody's requirements, they go through. The other one we want to cover is that, oh, the car maybe was distracted or some other reason and they went through, but the cyclist had time to react and avoid. So what we do to work out these sight envelopes or sight triangles, I've got three scenarios for you. Now, this first scenario here is where we have a main road and we have a cycle facility or a shared path facility running parallel with it. And this can happen quite a lot because you get a bit of road reserve and you want to build these facilities. So what you're looking to do is ensure that that vehicle can see a cyclist going along this way, back here, can see the conflict point, can see the cyclist at the other, coming from the other direction. You want to ensure that also for the vehicle as it's turning, and the vehicle as it's turning, you want to ensure that that vehicle from the other direction can see that one, conflict point, and there. Okay, so that's kind of our sight envelope that we're looking to cover in these scenarios. Now, an important thing we're thinking about here is not necessarily the free flow travel speed here, although that's going to come into play, but we have the requirement that this vehicle is going to have to slow down to navigate a turn, aren't they? They can't turn at 80 kilometers per hour. They will slow down to make that turn to some degree. So without going into the depths of the formulas and the like, we go back to our 2.5 meters a second squared deceleration, and I'll come back to actually calculating these distances shortly. But another scenario there is where we have, that path crossing mid-block, not near an intersection or on the approach to an intersection, maybe down here. And so we want to work out that sight line, just as we saw in the little video I played. And that's simply a normal sight triangle that you're working with to try to keep clear, although of course you're going to have it both sides as well. And then scenario 3, maybe that parallel and then the crossing point. So what we're going to do is say, okay, what is our environment? What is our scenario here? And, are we on this high speed road and, that turn in across, or are we down in a very low speed environment? Let's pick the travel time that we're going to use. So step 1, we pick one of those travel times based on those comments and that scenario, which includes observation time and reaction time. And so let's work out A. What's our setback of A? So that point we're looking the cyclist. So we go to another table, and this has sort of been done for you in terms of the calculations, and you can simply look there and say, okay, what is A? Well, I want to think about what approach speed the cyclist will be coming at. Is it that full cycle way where they're chugging along straight and there's nothing to impede the speed of the cyclist? And we're going to go up the top with the 30. Is it a slower speed, shared path, maybe with some horizontal deflection or vertical deflection on the cycle path, so they're slowing down a bit? Well, we can go down to the other end with a sort of 15 kilometer per hour there. And so you then simply pick whatever you've said as your travel time, and you pick your speed, and you get some sort of distance back for A. So that's the cyclist distance back. There you go. And Prue, you'll be happy to see there the P8 has made the table. That's Prue's favorite. Just use 8 meters. Okay, so that's A. So that's how far the cyclist's back. How do you work that one out? So that B distance, what are we talking about between car setback and the point of the turn? And you use a slightly different table because it's taking into account the fact that that vehicle is going to slow down to navigate that curve anyway. All right. So then you do the same thing, and you look at your operating speed of the main road. Whoa, sorry. Your operating speed of the main road there. And so that's the free flow speed of that vehicle. Then you're looking at, well, which scenario are we in? Is it a slow speed road or the like, or is it a fast road? And you pick a point on that one. And C, very similar, but factoring in there are a few things. And so you can do that, and you can find a nice, whatever it is. So you then have numbers for A, B, and C in these different scenarios, and you want to provide that area clear of hazard, of sightline impediments. A lot of standards and guidelines talk about, anything bigger than 200 mil, consider a sightline impediment. A bit of just judgment on that is appropriate. There's a few assumptions, in this 2.5 meter per second squared. That's squared in deceleration, flat terrain, and the coefficient of friction as a wet road as well. So just an example here. So you selected a 3-second travel time, and then from that table 2, you select and find that, okay, we need 17 meters back for A, and we need 21 meters back for C, and that's then our sightline triangle that we need to try to keep clear. So that again is just that's the process, but it's the nice sort of way to think about these things. But again, and I think I've slightly covered this off, but I'm going to ask it again to keep the group giving me answers. What if we can't meet this? What if there's a building here? I'll clear off some of my scribbles of a madman. What if we can't meet this? We've got a building there.
Beautiful building, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you.
Missed you calling. So what do we think, team?
Let's pop some ideas in there. Maybe, Bridget, they need a little break from all this.
Well, it is nearly break time, but we've had a suggestion of slowing both the cyclist and the vehicles. So, maybe slowing them before they get to that conflict point. Chris has said alter the approach alignments if that's an option. Put in signals.
And we're covering them off quite nicely there. So speed management for cars. So you can reduce that C distance, or B, depending on the scenario. Okay, so we can put traffic management on the approach to these. We can slow vehicles down. Then we can think about slowing down those cyclists, exactly as somebody said there. Like, you can do that with, chicanes, or often you just, have a turn in the bike facility, or there's a bit more use, or a bit around the world, but in Australia and New Zealand, of vertical deflection. So a raised platform on the approach for cyclists to slow them down as well. And that's going to reduce that AE distance, okay? And then we might, in some scenarios, select a lower travel time. So that's the other variable in this, that travel time. And then we're sort of right down to the point of saying, well, hang on, what is going on with the actual planning of this area and strategic intent of this area, and why can't, we meet this? And, do we need to sort of alter our thinking completely on this and maybe signalize it as a crossing point or the like? So here's an example. It comes into play a little bit in multiple sort of situations, but here's an interesting one where, they weren't meeting some of those requirements, but also drainage was just causing all sorts of trouble. Okay. And so the ability to raise that point, but you need to get those speeds, to get those sight lines. So the raised portion on the approach, bringing those down, and we keep a nice, sight triangle available there. And of course you can, thanks Kathy for the photo, by the way, you can think about actually having stop requirements. Now, I do caution you on this and use it in appropriate environments with speed controls on the approach and the like. But if you're really constrained, you could have a stop requirement for a vehicle to come to a stop to look. Now, I'm a big believer that we need to think about our road system practically, not just what the theory of the road rule says, and we need to really think about how people are going to use this. And we know stop signs that some people don't, if you haven't set the environment up for them to really stop. Raising that helps, certainly, but you'd want to think about getting their speed down with physical treatments on the approach to that anyway. What do you think, Bridget? This is a good point for a little break?
Oh, that's an excellent point for a break. Bang on 1 hour in. So what were you thinking, Ken, about 4 minutes? We give them 4 minutes?
4 minutes and 3 seconds.
Roger that. See you all back in 4 minutes time.
If you can hit that record. Thank you. Okay, roundabouts. And there was a long fear of doing anything around a roundabout. And I think we've broken the back of that in terms of pedestrian crossing facilities with pedestrian priority or cyclist priority around a roundabout. And that's exciting. And it gives us then an opportunity to really think about what we can do. Okay, so what I do is put you two options at a high level here. We have an option to have raised pedestrian crossings or crossing facilities right up on the hold line, option 1. See it there. Now, option 2 is where we set it back a bit. And we're talking about setting it back commonly 1 car length there. So you can sort of see 1 car length back. Now, there's a bit of variation on the exact distance of that. Take the principle of about a car length. TMR has some differences to Victoria, the ones I know. But what you can see there is that from a traffic flow perspective, this does not flow well because that one vehicle waiting for a pedestrian clogs it up. This one, at least one vehicle there, the circulating carriageway is kept free, right? Now, I don't particularly care if we clog up the cars, right? in some scenarios, a lot of scenarios, if they've designated that as a pedestrian priority area, an active area, cars getting through there quickly is not an objective. Okay, so you can absolutely legitimately do that. It has some advantages of pedestrian desire lines. Usually a pedestrian walking up here doesn't want to have to walk too far up here to go around there. They just want to walk straight across, don't they? So don't dismiss putting it right up to the hold line. However, I do put a however on this. You've got to be a little bit considerate of some implications that can have. So I've just showed you there the entering cars. If you have the exiting vehicles, okay, you do often then have a vehicle that waits and stores right on the pedestrian crossing. Now, from a safety perspective, I'm not overly concerned by this. Some people get very concerned by it. I'm not overly concerned because the speeds are very low. The pedestrians are walking around it. It's quite visible. Everything's very, very low speed. We did video analysis of one of these for a long time, and saw lots of things, but it was all very mild. But it doesn't really make it a friendly crossing for a pedestrian, especially people in wheelchairs or others. And, it's just not nice. So from that perspective, I put this as the preferred way to do it. Okay. So if you can, and it works out well, that is our preference. I talked to you a little bit about sight lines there, so I don't think I need to go into too much more of that. A couple of pictures just to show you it in, at the ground level there. You can see a good sort of buffer area there for a vehicle to go over and prop and wait. And because that vehicle's there, the vehicle back here is more likely to wait there and provide that continued space. Here's the other one. They're kind of mild raised crossings, but nonetheless, you can see there the vehicles sort of blocking the circulating carriageway. Again, down in Port Phillip City Council, who are very okay with blocking up cars and making them a very slow journey through these areas that they want pedestrians and cyclists. So they made their decision. That's fine. We're okay with that. The other thing, and this is more general than just at roundabouts, but we always want to, where we possibly can, keep anything raised on the network perpendicular to travel of vehicles. So at that right angle to a vehicle coming in. So I've got a proposed raised crossing here. So it's a signalized crossing currently, pedestrian crossing, traffic signals, signalized crossing. And because they are, safe system champions, they want to raise this to slow vehicles. However, it's right on that curve. So I suppose I put it out there to the group on this one. What can we do here? We've got proposing a raised crossing, but we're going to have trucks coming around on a curve and they could be destabilized, maybe motorbikes on a lean. We've got some challenges there. Does anybody have any ideas on how we could alter that?
We've got a couple of ideas already. Anthony suggests a wedge-shaped platform. Lachlan says extend the raised part outside the curve. And Malcolm says put the table to 90 degrees, but leave the markings straight. Brenda's suggesting a mast arm, and we've got another vote for raising further away.
All very legitimate things to think about. I suppose the mast arm's more one of visibility to the crossing point rather than the geometry of the raised and the destabilizing. But yeah, I mean, splaying it, wedging it, getting it to parallel, absolutely a possibility. So again, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's the saying, isn't it? Yeah, raised crossing is what we're going for here because it's awesome. Don't let a little design challenge like a curve get in your way. Splay it, is a possibility. So you can give a few prizes out for that, Kathy. And then I like the other idea. I mean, could we have longer platforms? Could we extend it out? Maybe we do the platforms on the approach, because the key principle is we want people slowing down on the approach to that signalized crossing. Okay, so you lessen the chance of a crash. And if that happens to happen, they're going very slow speed and the severity is right down. So again, roundabouts, I've collected some really great documents for you, put them in the resource folder. I've got the Victorian one, I've got some TMR ones. I think might have seen some links going in the chat with some pointing at some of these, probably same documents. So there's lots of good information now coming about. So pedestrians crossing at roundabouts and the like, let's get on it. Another little tip here, just as we have these areas where a cycleway or a shared path crosses a side road, and we talked about lots and lots of scenarios like this. You can see this one has a bit of a curve in it, which will actually slow the cyclist down approaching the conflict point so we can get better sight triangles. But the area there, and I'm going to drive a little car in there, and you can see that it's nice to have that space for a vehicle to prop on that side in these scenarios as well, just the same sort of way we have as a roundabout. But also, as this vehicle is doing a right turn in here, it gives them the ability to sort of make decisions to go in and not have that conflict with other vehicles coming through. They can prop there. They're more likely to give way to the cyclists as they come through. So really nice little way to do it. You also get that benefit of a little bit of tapering of speed of the cyclist as they approach that area. Okay, ramp grades. So, Bridget, I'm a tenth of the way through. No, I joke. We're doing all right. I might have to put the foot down a little bit later to cover off a few things. General principles of ramp grades here. Okay, the sharper the ramp grade, the lower the speed vehicles will go approaching it. All right. It's not about vehicles hitting it and slowing down. They see it, they slow down on the approach. Now, there will be a feedback mechanism, and people drive the same roads and streets very often, and they will hit it once a little bit fast, and the next time they'll go slower, or they'll hit it too slow and they'll go, I can put the foot down on this one. And so we will start to see a calibration of that speed. So here's a real stock standard setup for a raised pedestrian crossing. 3.6 meter platform, 1.2 meter taper down or ramp length, and 100 mil high. So there's a stock standard one. Oh, I put that up. I wonder if anybody's there. What's quick prize for the ramp grade on that? I wonder if anybody was alert enough to see it, or they're going to quickly calculate it themselves. What's the ramp grade? Geez.
We've got a 10 to 1, a 1 in 12, and a 1 in 15. Is it one of those?
It is. It's a 1 in 12. It's a 1 in 12, people.
Yeah, 1 in 12.
Because
Anthony, it's prize.
Yeah. Now, why is it a 1 in 12? So, okay, it goes up 100 and it goes along 1200. So it's a 1 up to 12 out. Okay. Now, what, this is a little, maybe somebody can answer this for me. Why on earth do we use 1 in 12 and for, or 1 in this for ramp grades, for batter slopes and the like, but we'll then use the angle, the percentage for longitudinal grade and things like that? I don't know. We're fickle beasts, us technical people. Anyway, so it's about the angle. So just a little note, you've got a quiz at the end of this and you might get asked a ramp grade. So just remember that little that little slide. Up to out and a grade, one in, whatever. Okay. When you think about ramp grade, you do need to factor in the longitudinal grade of the road. So this is where we are starting to really think about that percentage and how that affects it. So, you know, very steep down there, we're going to have quite a challenge for a vehicle to get over it. I've over-exaggerated it, but you get the idea. Okay. So we have these ramp grades, and this chart I find extremely useful. And what we're looking at is down here is no speed reduction. You're not going to get speed reduction. Here is what we pretty much say is that's what we're going to get in the middle of that. You really start to damage your vehicle if you're up there, and it's just really insane if you go over them at this speed. So let's look at that 1 in 12 that we had, and that's the blue line here. Okay, and what we can expect there is somewhere in the 25, like 20-ish area is the speed that vehicles will get. That's what they will navigate over it if they don't need to stop and they're just using it like a speeder. If we go a little bit shallower, right, to a 1 in 16, see that's just a little bit above 30. So we're starting to get that idea of what speed can we expect. Now, and I've put quite a few sort of different, you know, grades and things in there for higher speed areas. We use those for raised safety platforms of higher speed intersections and getting, you know, vehicle speeds down. And I've done the work for you again in terms of getting stuff from Austroads, from Australian standards, from New Zealand stuff, because everybody's gone and a little bit different in what they'll accept, what they won't accept. So I'm not going to go through this all point by point, because you can get my PDFs out of the learning management system and look through this yourself. Okay. And there's some PMR stuff there. There's some Wakakatahi and NZTA stuff in there as well. I think the 150 really fascinates me for TMR, and I'd be interested in feedback from the Queensland designers in the troubles you may or may not have for a platform height of that. It's very high. Okay, so well, let's just have a look at that again. So you can have that, which is our 1 in 12, and then it'd go to a 1 in 15 if we had longer ramps, so a bit shallower there. That 150 high up there, and if you did it steep, I mean, that's very steep, very high ramp, like very, very high, very steep. And you could, you know, flatten it out. Now, admittedly, you could flatten it out over a huge distance, but it kind of starts to defeat the purpose of it if you do that. So then you've got your lower ones. 75 is really popular. I popped a 50 in just so we had some nice even, but you're really starting to see there that your ramp is not going to do a lot. Now, why do we care about any of this? Why don't we put just super steep things and, you know, make sure everybody goes really, really, really slow? And that's what we want. Well, physically, vehicles may not be able to actually navigate over this. And you want to watch your raised crossing program die an instant death, you build it so the common vehicle cannot physically get over it. Okay, so we need to take that into account. Okay, and the points of pain are front overhang, scraping, bottom of the vehicle, scraping, back of the vehicle. Now, this little sedan ain't having that, but if you've got a long back overhang, it can bottom out. And again, the back overhang scraping there, or the front scraping as they come down. So this is where we start to say, well, what are the vehicles out there? What actual dimensions do we have to design for and think about? Okay. And if you look into most vehicle regulations, I've taken the Australian vehicle regulations here, we see there that it's got some specific parameters there. 100 mil within 1 meter of any axle. Like that is minimum. Like we know it has to have that. So that 100 mil is an interesting one. You've got some requirements around grades that vehicles have to be able to navigate. So they're going, the vehicle designers are checking that it's going to meet some road design standards and vice versa with, thinking about each other. Of course, we need to think about buses. Okay. And I have heard, unfortunately, quite a bit, oh, we can't do anything raised because it's a bus route. And I say that is wrong. Absolutely, you can do raised things on bus routes. Absolutely. Okay, just know your buses and know how we can design this. So let's have a look at some general minimums of buses with passengers in them. And, these would be our absolute lowest bus possible. Okay, here comes our bus. Right, 100 mil is going to be, it's going to be weighted passengers, going to be put down, and this is a super low bus. Okay, you're going to have some differences. There's some specifics around distance off the axles, front overhang length, and the like. Indicative stuff only. A more common passenger bus, and we've got different ones, 12.5 meter. We're talking some, decent clearances, 190 here, and you got your long rigids at 14, and you've got your articulateds, and they're going to get even higher. But remember, they're going to, well, you can see it up there. They're going to do some all sorts of funky things as they go up and down stuff. All right. So if we have that super high length at the absolute lowest, the bus is not going to make it, first of all, on that 150, unless you extended the ramp length so far that they could sort of slowly come up, and it just renders it absolutely useless for what its purpose is. So we have to think about that bus navigating over, not scraping there, then sort of being straddled over it, coming up, not scraping its back as it goes down. There's information from the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator on bus specifics and requirements, and your jurisdiction will have information on this. So let's have a look. Okay, here's a RAM at 100 mil. It's actually the same one that I was showing before. I'll use it again because I've got lots of nice photos of it with a nice new camera. 100 mil high, 1 in 15 ramp grade, and this sort of works very adequately for an area that doesn't have a very frequent bus turnover. Okay, so the bus has to slow down quite a bit to navigate over this because it's quite a sort of exercise for them to get over it. They're not going to scrape, okay? They're not going to bottom out. They will navigate over it. However, it's not a common bus route. This is the one that picks up kids from the school, but it's not that frequency of every 9 minutes a bus comes along. This is more the frequency of every 9 minutes a bus comes along. And this is where we sort of find ourselves in this comfortable range, or you've got to find this balance. 75 mil high and at 1 in 20 ramp grade, those are sort of what a bus will navigate quite comfortably. They'll slow down, they'll navigate it. Everybody's generally happy with it. It does keep vehicle speeds down. You might need to monitor that and maybe put in some extra local area traffic management if you need to. But the 75 and the 20. Now here's another bus route, and they were worried about it. They've gone to this, and they've gone 75 mil high to a 1 in 27. So what's that? 2 meter ramp length. Now that's got, like, vehicles are fast, and know this one, that people really aren't slowing down. To a degree, you're not having any benefit of raising this crossing. The only benefit really you get from this is maybe that, well, you might get a bit of benefit, but that difference in color might actually be more beneficial. It is almost flat. I think I just saw that pop up. Okay. And so tell me, like, if you were in this situation and you were this local government and you were concerned, buses, I'm really concerned by this, and what, how do you think you might be able to manage it? What are some other ideas that we might be able to do? Okay, we could go to the shorter ramp grade, and we could go back to that 1 in 20. But what else might be possible?
So we've got speed cushions as an option.
Anthony might have to run this course for me. He's coming in with exactly the way I want us to be thinking about this, okay? A raised platform is, like a raised crossing is better. All right, why is it better? Well, it's got accessibility benefits. It elevates the pedestrian or cyclist that is crossing into better eye line heights. You only need to do one actual feature. Okay, so there's goodness about it, right? However, there's going to be scenarios where you can't do it. It could be drainage, it could be curb line issues. And so what can we do? Because again, the principle is, can we slow vehicles on approach or through that conflict point? And speed cushions, wonderful, wonderful opportunity here in those scenarios. I still have them as my number 2 option, but again, we've heard, oh, I can't do a raised crossing because of curb line. I can't do a raised crossing because of drainage. I can't do a raised crossing because of buses. Well, okay, I think some of those people are just scared of things that don't actually transpire. But if you do, you can go and look at this. And lots of examples here. You can see one photo Prue took, and there you can see one here. Now, you'll notice they do them there and there, right? Why would you need to slow them on the exit? Well, that's actually to stop a vehicle going around like that. And we do see that if you just put one. So this one, they've sort of done a little separator. I would like to see that sort of extended if you're going to just go with the separator approach, because I still feel vehicles will do a bit of that. Now, another reason people, I don't want to do a cushion because there's maintenance challenge, and spike down, rubber, blah, blah, blah. They can asphalt them. And they're there. Maintenance is an issue. Okay, very visible. And again, a wonderful device. There's some specs for you. If you want to use those, your jurisdiction will probably have some. 75 mil high seems adequate to reduce speed of vehicles, and the width of them there being that 1.6, so the bus can straddle, yet a passenger vehicle will slow down. And another one, just as we sort of still in the ramp grade discussion, is the fact that you may not need to use the same ramp grade in and out. And here's a nice little picture from a lovely looking crossing in New Zealand. You can tell it's New Zealand because it's got a countdown, not a Woolworths. And so you can see there that the ramp entry in is steeper than the ramp entry out. And that can help in those situations with larger vehicles and buses getting a nicer exit from the crossing. Okay, sorry, Bridget, I'm going to pause there and see if you've got any questions for me before I jump into some lighting.
Not so much. There's some comments around, challenges with authorities being not always willing to put any kind of platform on bus routes and having challenging conversations about it. But I think, kind of as you've mentioned, we're seeing more and more of them. We've got clever designs. We can get around some of those issues. Yeah, just a good general chit chat going on. I don't think we've got any outstanding questions in particular. People always want to know where all your photos are taken. Maybe that's feedback for us next time to satisfy their curiosity and put in some locations where we can, but also a good good little challenge for you to figure it out.
Oh yeah, no, most of them are my own photos, so I can put in locations. Yeah, will do. And actually, one of the things that I really do want is when you're in those situations with road authorities that may, or particularly individuals within road authorities, you can't, tarnish a road authority with the same everybody within it.
Yeah.
You can use other jurisdictions examples and show that it's there, it's fine, it's common practice, buses, and try to show examples, because people are scared of what has never been done, and then when it's been done, it's not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to talk about lighting now, and I've picked out some really key points here. I'm not going to go into the detail, but I've got you some key things to think about. There are a number of Australian standards associated with lighting, and each jurisdiction will have some sort of, Australian New Zealand standard for lighting, which is 1158, and there's another one. But what we want to think about for any crossing point is that lighting, if possible, of both sides. And then we've got to think about a vertical plane as well as a horizontal plane. Okay, so you'll notice there they're talking about a 3 meter setback. We had the 1.5, but this is often, a little bit of an extra buffer on that. In terms of the vertical and horizontal plane of lighting, what we're thinking about is not just the lux on the ground at these points, but we're thinking about also up at a 1.5 for the lighting. And so you can see there's quite a few points where you would do your lighting check if you were doing a full lighting assessment of a crossing under this approach. So you can try to piggyback on existing lighting. I really encourage you to think, actually get a lighting assessment done in some of these situations, because the spread of light can be very varied depending on the height of the light. So you need to think about that existing height of the light. Now, how far back do you want to put the lighting on the shared paths or the cycleways? Well, the obvious answer to this is whatever your sight distance requirement is, because a cyclist approaching, we want that cyclist to be seen by this vehicle on that approach. Do we need to sort of light back to here for the vehicle? Probably not so much. Their headlights are going to be pretty bright, and the cyclists will be able to see that. You could, and often in these urban areas, there is some sort of lighting, but then we need to light the raised portion so the vehicle can see. Remember that approach sight distance. Approach sight distance. Can we see this? Well, we're going to need to be able to light it, to see it, to know that we've got to slow down. And here's one from TMR, and they've got a 10-meter rule. And as I understand, it's sort of just that blanket 10-meter rule. Maybe the PRU 8-meter plus a safety margin, but it'll cover off a number of situations. But the point being that you don't just light up that part. You got to light up back a distance so we can see the approaching cyclist at night. That's probably all I want to cover at this stage on lighting, and I welcome any comments, additional, extra, just taking those concepts and running with them, because I want to spend a little bit of time talking about drainage and how we deal with the deluge. So drainage, again, can be a significant challenge with design of raised features on our road network. And again, I added to the list of, reasons why people abandon raised crossings often. And again, I want us to sort of think about, well, what are our options? And let's not be driven on the principles we want to achieve by this. Let's look to what features and what changes can we make. And I've gathered here 6 different concepts for how you could deal with water. So you could just ignore doing anything in terms of just keep your curb and channel and keep your your everything as it was. Now, I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that on a number of reasons. Really not providing a great crossing facility. Obviously, people in wheelchairs or the others are going to struggle to navigate that. So next option we have, so I call like low ramp height. So you essentially have decided in this scenario that you can have quite a shallow and low ramp and the water can go over it. The next one is a lovely sort of luxury if you can possibly do it. You position your crossing at a high point, so water will flow away. Now, you have to balance that with pedestrian desire line and all the wonderful stuff that was done about location of crossing points, because just plonking your pedestrian crossings at high points so you don't have to deal with drainage is kind of a bit of a useless way to do it. Maybe, theoretically, if you were doing greenfield subdivision design, that could be factored in. I mean, that would be a really cool and interesting way to think about design. But anyway. Okay, the next one here is to ramp up, or ramp down and ramp up. And so we still have that, the curb ramp down. And then we're over a space, raise it back up. I don't mind this. I know some people get really angry about it, and they don't think it's good. There's situations where I say it's inappropriate due to the steepness that comes down and the steepness that goes up. But in these flat areas, you can save quite a bit of money and quite a bit of problem by having this. You need a fairly wide road. You need curb outstands set back, and you've got to think about how your cyclists will get through there. But I wouldn't dismiss it immediately. And we've got some sort of box drain, which is essentially, where you're laying a plate over the top, or an Aggie drain, or something like that. And then we've got the pit and pipe. We're going to actually put the water subsurface and expand our pipe network if we need, and move it through that way. So there's sort of 6 scenarios and options there. Of course, you can move to then thinking about those speed cushions, which we talked about if you're really having trouble, so slowing the vehicles before that crossing point. So there you can see some additional drainage facilities as this raised crossing was being built to cater for that water. There you can see some different configurations of box sort of drains. I call them mini box culverts sometimes. There's another one, and here's back to that one in Richmond. Now, why have I brought this up? I mentioned we were doing the sort of pre/post opening audit with my colleague Chris back there, and it'd really been in for about a week, and it was already clogged up with leaf litter and the like. So it can need constant maintenance. There had been a bit of rain and things. So, you've got to factor that in and think about it. Another cool, there's some more ones. again, showing that you can get that issue with grates and things anyway. So it's not just that's the absolute worst one. There is this nice little ability to do water sensitive urban design style thinking. I love this little one where you have this entry for water there. You then almost have like a mini swale, a mini like retention basin, tutting basin there. You can have some plants. You know, you've got opportunity, you've got space. Yeah, so I talked about that one, the up and down, and how and when you can do it. These sorts of ones, you know, really flat in, really flat through, looking fairly good for or okay for a wheelchair, a mobility scooter, or the like. These ones is where I start to go, that's not going to be great. We're coming from a high place down and up, and it'll be a challenge. I'll let you ponder and debate, you know, is that's the only thing you can do? Is it better to do it or not do it and slow the vehicles down? I mean, slowing vehicles down is a wonderful thing, but you know, we should be aspiring to better than this if we possibly can. Here's one that went in, and it's an interesting one to ponder. I did watch the this lady with her walker thing, you know, spend 3 minutes, probably an exaggeration, maybe a minute, sort of just slowly navigating up and over that. But I go, it's not ideal. Like, don't get me wrong, that flatten that out, absolutely. The fact that any vehicle that was approaching would be going slow, it's a very clear priority. There's some advantages there. Nonetheless, let's try and get a nice level a run through. I popped this into the chat, I think, after Naomi asked some questions. I do like this diagram if you're in Australia, because it just lays it all out quite easily and nicely and shows you what we should be aspiring to. Personally, I think we're way over signing these things in a lot of situations. And I've got a bit of a gripe with it, but a warning sign on the approach, of course, something to designate where you're not going to let vehicles stop in order to keep the sight lines because you've calculated those, right? Then you've got your legs, the regulatory requirement for a pedestrian crossing in Australia, that gives pedestrians priority. Something to say, hey, there's a raised platform and you should go over at about this speed. So the raised one there. And so that's our setup. And you can see there, that point and that point at the back as well, with them on both sides. Think about the height of that, 2 meters, bottom of your setup. There, and you know, trying to ensure that we're not blocking sight lines, people aren't hitting their head on it and the like. And just thinking that if you've got side roads, you do and you should be warning of that approaching crossing so as they're turning. People get really excited about this. I mean, excited in an angry way for your traditional traffic engineer, because we've got 2 regulatory devices on the one pole. This is, you know, I don't particularly care at all, but some people get very irate about that. Why don't I care at all? Well, it's context. If this was a high-speed environment and we had 2 important regulatory signs, yeah, there's a very logical reason to separate those. This is like urban slow, everybody, like it's all slow. Anyway, somebody mentioned the concepts that we put out just to try to save a little bit of, you know, manufacturing metal and the amount of sign clutter out there. Could we not just combine the raised and the regulatory sign? But of course, that blows everybody's mind in trying to do that. But we put it out there, and if some jurisdiction wants to take it on, we absolutely encourage that. And the line marking, again, slightly different around different jurisdictions. And I've pointed you at the different standards where you get the line marking for a couple of jurisdictions. There's this interesting one about, okay, well, why can't we have little tiny, why are we going 3.6 or these long distances? Well, as a driver approaches, if we've got it too narrow, it can look a bit like a speed hump. Okay, so that elongated bit helps the driver to see that. Also, there's sort of space for pedestrians to cross each other and the like. New Zealand does a little bit of a optional triangle warning approach and a hold line and the like. Piano key markings used in Australia under the 1742 standard. So again, have a look at your jurisdictional guidance. And New Zealand uses this different little lollipop thing. Australia uses the walking legs. Other jurisdictions around the world use both different options. That signs and lines around that shared path crossing or cycleway crossing, as I mentioned, I really just encourage people to think about this as a road. Like, think about your shared path as a road. How would you sign that? Okay, you would sign it with a hold line, a give way sign, if you've got appropriate sight distance, and that's pretty much it, except for, just to make it a little bit clearer, a supplementary sign, give way to pedestrians and cyclists, and there's some options there for some extra ones. Again, I've grabbed stuff for you that'll help you. Tactile ground surface indicators, RRPMs, flashing lights. There's all standards and guidelines around them. And you can follow those from your jurisdiction. The principles are just trying to make it clear that it is a crossing, make it consistent, ensure that all people can navigate their way through it. So that's our tactile ground surface indicators and the like. And there's lots of different configurations where we have shared path crossings, meeting signalized intersections, different crossings on slip lanes, how you do it. And the one that I'm probably not going to have time to go into, because I need to give Kathy some time to explain your little quiz and how you end the course. Colored treatments, other than the sort of stock standard ones where we use yellow for these shared path crossings, we use green for a cycleway. This is, I'm generalizing for Australia, and I apologize for other jurisdictions here. Do we use colored underneath the zebra crossings? Well, in general, no. Like, we like the contrast of black to white. We like it to be very visible. We think about people with different eye conditions and ability to see the contrast and the difference. We also have people, and Bridget nicely sort of explained it, who have mapped the road network in their head in one way or another, and that's the common way we do it. So it can confuse and the like. So we need to consider that. There's a nice setup there, isn't it? Except for if you're really worried about two regulatory signs on a pole, but as I say, not me. There we go. Plonk it all onto one pole, eh? So we've got the raised, the advisory, the regulatory, and the give way to bikes. And again, I say, well, I'm kind of okay with this. I don't want extra poles. I don't want extra clutter. Do we need all those signs? I'll leave it to you to decide, but that's what the current standard dictates. Okay. Pavement. You're only going to get 2 slides for me on pavement because I think they're the 2 most important things. Plus, I'm not a pavement guy. I did, and I think it was my organization punishing me at one point, work in maintenance for 9 months. And so I got some pavement knowledge, but I really don't know a huge amount, and others can do it. But boxing out here is trying to give you the ability. So, you dig out there, give you the ability to actually get some sort of change there in grade and not have it break away. You can't sort of lay it on top. And concrete is going to be easier to get a wedge. If you do it with asphalt, a roller, it'll all flatten out, and it's harder to do. So your concrete becomes easy. Concrete's a little harder to build, and it's going to take a bit longer to build, and you might have to do multiple lays and the like, but you'll get a nicer, sharper up and down. I don't know, and somebody maybe can tell me, can we color the concrete a bit more? Can we get it darker so that the contrast stands out? I'd like to see that. I've seen some very light concrete with white lines on the top that you really can't see. So that's a thing you can factor in. Bridget,
have you done it?
I snuck in some slides after this point, just in case I had a spare minute or two.
Well, there's been a lot of chatter, but not too much, in terms of specific questions. I reckon you could do a few more. We've got about 8 minutes, but I know that Kathy wants to jump in for a few at the end. So
yeah, and I'd like to just have a quick wrap up and thank you time as well. But let me just show you. I only actually put one in because it was a question that was asked, and I thought,
oh, it's an exciting one.
Yeah,
Look at it.
It's the best. No, I put it in because somebody said, how close can you have pedestrian crossings to each other? And I was like, that's a great question. And I dug around and I found the only place I could find was New South Wales commenting on a 40 metre. But then it did exactly as I thought and said, well, if you're going to go closer than that, just make the whole area a shared zone. Yeah. And I went, okay, that's pretty logical and smart. So I just popped that out there for people. And then I got this one, which is Dancing Wombats. Is that more exciting, Bridget?
It's getting out of control. seems like best possible slide to end on. Thanks very much, Ken. That's brilliant. And yeah, we had a lot of engagement in the chat. People are really into it. I think a nice contrast from some of the other modules where actually a lot of us are technical people and we need all this information, and we've got it now. So thanks very much, and I'll hand over to Kathy to wrap us up.
Oh, I love it. I can't top the Dancing Wombats, unfortunately. They're going to go away just for a quick moment. Okay, so we are at the end of the course. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. If you jump back into the learning management system, there is a quiz. So there's Ken's presentation from today, the Wombat Crossing signage article that we've put together, and there's a quiz. So you jump in here and do your quiz. And then once you've done that, the last thing you will need to do is complete the course feedback. So this is the first time we've run it, so we'd really love your feedback as to how it went and what you'd like to see more or less of. So complete the course feedback, and then your certificate will appear just under here, and you'll be able to download a copy of your certificate. And if you've got any dramas with that, please send me an email and I'll put you on the right track.
How many attempts at the quiz do they have, and what do they need to get?
Good question. 75% and unlimited attempts, Ken. Unlimited.
And of course, get in contact if you're really struggling with that. But hopefully you got the key takeaways from, well, my presentation, but also the other 3 wonderful presentations, a few questions just to make sure you've got those key takeaways. You'll get into it, give us that feedback, and we're off. I'll just take my opportunity to say thank you to the other wonderful presenters and to Kathy for all the work with her team behind the scenes. A huge amount of effort goes into organising that, and we only see a brief little bit of Kathy's face, but she does a wonderful job. So thank you, exactly. Kathy.
Can I also echo that, and also like all the work gone to this course on behalf of all of us and also Kathy and the team. But what I wanted to mention is, like, no matter how many courses you go to, as long as you don't go out and do real job done, it doesn't really change the world. So I really encourage you all to sort of take at least 2 or 3 knowledge from this course and do actual work out there for pedestrians.
And send us the pictures. Be great.
Yeah. So on that, you might get a little wombat pin.
Oh.
in the post at some point, and we want you to wear it with pride.
Oh, so shiny.
And it'll show people that you've completed the course. There also might be the launch of the Golden Wombat Award, where we will put it out there and to participants who have completed the course to send us photos, and we will award the Golden Wombat. So the best raised crossing, or the most unique, or something that's been done, and we might award that with some
or
stuff.
the wombat that has like very good inclusion, or has different vehicles on it, or situated in a really nice area. So like you learn many things in this course, use them and find a good wombat.
The Golden Wombat Award is coming, so we will make sure we tell you that.
I was going to say a brown wombat for the worst wombat that we've got out there. Should we also have the poor wombat? Anyway.
The cuboid poo. Don't wombats do cuboid poo?
Yes, they do. They do.
It's a good factoid from a Kiwi.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on our inaugural raised crossing training. So we really appreciate that you guys have jumped on board and gotten into it, and we'd really love your feedback. So please provide that in there. And thank you to this great group of people who put this all together. Well done.
Yeah. Now, Kathy, I also want to say that this is my experience with training courses like this, is that we put a topic like this out, and who do we get? The most passionate, the best, they're the designers, they're the people who know it. They're all thinking like us, right? And we have this wonderful time of talking about it. What we need is to get some of those others who are a bit resistant to raised crossings, who maybe a little bit pushed back. So if you can think of those people that would really benefit from this, training and the experience that you've been through and the messages that we're trying to get across, we really encourage you to alert them to this course, and hopefully it'll help us get more of these raised crossings out there. So thank you.
Really good point from James here, like send it to funders, decision makers, sometimes even politicians, councillors, and also to our sort of international participants, please pass on the word. We're going to continue having those 4 spots available for LMIC people, so please pass on the word.
And if you are encountering challenges out there or need advice, you've got the contact details of all of the presenters now. Reach out. We love sharing information and examples and the like. So you get them from lots of different people, and yeah, we're happy to help out.
And that link on the Miro board, that will stay there, so you can have a look at. It's got lots of information and data that we kind of collected in the course, which you can refer back to as well. And you'll see that we're kind of all experts in what are the barriers to getting these crossings in. So you can go back and have a look at that.
Have a wonderful weekend. If you're in New Zealand, have a wonderful long weekend. And thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I'll see you soon.